Let's begin this hour with a look at a subject you're not hearing about on the mainstream media. We're going to talk about the war in Afghanistan. Now, the wars in both Iraq and Afghanistan were central to discussions this time 4 years ago, as candidate Barack Obama and candidate John McCain laid out in full detail their plans for ramping up and then winding down the wars. There are still a few months left, but this is a topic neither candidate this time around seems to want to touch. Shortly after coming into office, President Obama announced a surge of 30,000 troops in Afghanistan, and that surge was to be followed by this plan.
We will pursue the following objectives within Afghanistan. We must deny al-Qaeda a safe haven. We must reverse the Taliban's momentum and deny it the ability to overthrow the government. And we must strengthen the capacity of Afghanistan's security forces and government so that they can take lead responsibility for Afghanistan's future.
So when will that future be upon us? By the time voters hit the voting booths in November, the war will be in its 12th year. I want to talk more about this with a man who was actually taken captive by the Taliban for 45 days. For more, I'm joined by Jerry Van Dyke, a journalist and author of the book Captive: My Time as a Prisoner of the Taliban. Hey there, Jerry. Thank you so much for being on the show. Tell me first a little bit about this experience, this 45 days with the Taliban, and what your lessons have to offer us as a country as we look to the next chapter in Afghanistan.
My experience as a prisoner of the Taliban, and I was the first American journalist captured by the Taliban. I was the second captured in Pakistan. The first one was Daniel Pearl, who was slaughtered by al-Qaeda. I was captured by the Taliban. The difference between al-Qaeda and the Taliban, in my experience, was that I was a guest as much as I was a prisoner. They made a very clear point that while I was definitely a prisoner, that they would treat me according to the laws of the country, the laws of their tribe, the laws of their people, the Pashtuns. It's called Pashtunwali. The Pashtuns are the largest ethnic group in Afghanistan and in western Pakistan. The Taliban are Pashtuns. NATO, the United States, are in essence at war against the Pashtuns, not against other ethnic groups in Afghanistan. What I learned was that they will never give in, that they are fighting the same war, that their fathers, as they put it, or their grandfathers fought, the Mujahideen, against the Soviet Union. I was a journalist in Afghanistan during the 1980s with the Mujahideen, and in my experience, there is no difference between the two. They use the same type of weapons. They have the same very deep religious convictions. They are not afraid to die. They will fight to the very end. And one reason I think NATO, the United States, are having such a difficult time, as the Soviet Union had a difficult time, is because they are not afraid to die for a cause in which they believe. We are both seen, NATO, the United States, as the Soviet Union in the 1980s, as infidel invaders, outsiders, non-Muslims, come to impose upon them what they call a Western religion, that is democracy. Therefore, I don't think that today, in my experience, will show that, based upon my own experiences, that NATO and the United States are fighting. We have now about, the surge is drawing down. There were the 30,000 to which you alluded earlier that President Obama sent in will draw down at the end of September. There'll be about 70,000 are fighting when you consider all the Afghan security forces are fighting about, according to the Pentagon, 20,000 Taliban, and the war continues.
Yeah, absolutely. And you really have a unique perspective because of this time that you spent with the Mujahideen back in the 1980s. And I was going to ask you, and you sort of answered it, that things are very similar today as they were 30 years ago. But it seems to me that either the military generals, those leading this effort, those sort of designing the strategy, that they either don't understand that or they're not really conveying that to the American people. So I guess I want to ask you, Jerry, I mean, what would you add to the discussion here when it comes to what the American public needs to know about Afghanistan as a region?
I think what the United States, and you made a very good point at the start of your question there, and that is, I don't feel that the Bush administration or the Obama administration has been straight with the American public as to exactly why we are fighting in Afghanistan, what led to this war in Afghanistan. And that goes back to the 1980s when, or even in the 1970s, before the Soviet Union invaded, and according to Secretary of Defense, former Secretary of Defense Robert Gates in his book, From the Shadows, as well as President Jimmy Carter's national security advisor, Zbigniew Brzezinski, who said in an interview with Nouvelle Observateur, a French magazine in 1998, we wanted to draw the Soviet Union into Afghanistan in the 1980s in order to pay it back, according to them, for what it did to us in Vietnam. So what happened was, and this is the same thing today on a different level, it became a proxy war in which the United States used, with Pakistan, its ally, the Mujahideen to fight against the Soviet Union, and the people who suffered most, far and away, were the Afghans. Today we have another form of a proxy war, which has evolved into a proxy war, in my view, between the United States and its allies against Pakistan. Pakistan very clearly is backing the Taliban. That's one thing that I learned as a prisoner. They said not a shot. My jailer said, while I was very much afraid, there were times when we had conversations and they never laid a hand on me. He said, not a shot would be fired in Afghanistan without Pakistan's permission. He, as a Pashtun, as a member of the Taliban, acknowledged that the role of Pakistan was crucial. And I think that that is the real issue here.
Well, let me stop you for a second, Jerry. That's really interesting that you brought that up. And I think something that a whole lot of people don't know. In the clip I showed at the beginning from President Obama, that was from 2009, and he really laid out sort of a little more specifically the plan for Afghanistan. And one of the things he said was that Pakistan and the United States were in this together, that the success, quote-unquote success, depended very largely on this relationship. That was 2009. As we know, things have changed immensely between the U.S. and Pakistan. That relationship has taken some pretty bad turns between drone strikes in Pakistan, between, the Osama bin Laden assassination in Pakistan, and, the list goes on. The friendship is, at best, I can say, a little scarred right now between the two countries. So you're saying that in your time with the Taliban, that they essentially said those two countries were the ones with the good friendship?
So you touched on a very important point here, and that is, yes, President Obama did say that in 2009, and the United States has had a long-standing and very close relationship with Pakistan, particularly with the Pakistani army, almost since its inception, but particularly in the 1950s when it made an alliance to go against the spread of communism. And I don't think that alliance really has changed. Yes, what you said is correct, that this friendship, the two allies are certainly at one another's throats to a degree now, and it's been frayed to a great degree now. However, we don't know what is going on behind the scenes, and it's my firm belief that the United States and its allies will not be able to extricate itself from Afghanistan without an agreement from Pakistan. And I think that the negotiations that are going on, or that have gone on and are going to have to go on again, cannot take place without the backing of Pakistan. Prime example, that the United States now has, go back to what former Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Admiral Michael Mullen, said just before he retired, when he said that the Haqqani network, led by a man with whom I lived in the 1980s, Jalaluddin Haqqani, the most lethal, the most powerful, the most brutal, the most effective anti-American Taliban group, he said, is an arm of the ISI, which is the military intelligence agency of Pakistan. Today, the United States has yet to declare the Haqqani network a terrorist organization, even though leaders of Congress have asked the president to do this. Why not? Most probably, in my view, is because we are trying to secretly negotiate our way out of Afghanistan with the Haqqani network. We cannot do that unless we get permission from or work closely with, if you want to base this upon, and I believe it, what the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Michael Mullen, said, Pakistan. So there is a very close tie here, and what you said at the outset here is true, and what President Obama said in 2009 is also true. One, what he said was we must work closely with Pakistan, and what you said, the relationship is frayed.
Jerry.
And you gave the excellent reasons. But deep down, underneath, behind the scenes, we've got to work together to get out of there.
Let me ask you a question, though. Does it matter if we leave yesterday, if we leave in a year from now, if we leave in 5 years from now, in terms of how we're going to leave that country? All the reading that I've done from journalists who have spent a considerable amount of time in the country say these different factions, these different tribes, they're just waiting. And while they wait, they're training. Does it matter when we leave?
No, no, but I do think that they will never give in, and I want to emphasize that. Whether it was the 1980s, when the Soviets were there and the United States was backing the Mujahideen, or today, now that we're fighting those whose sons, whose fathers we backed then, they will not give in either. Many people feel that if the U.S. and NATO draw down, that the Taliban will have fewer people to fight. There's no infidel invaders on the ground. However, I don't think anybody believes that the United States is going to pull out and end this war in 2014. The Pentagon, DOD, does not want to lose this war. No army wants to lose this war. And right now, the United States is clearly not winning this war because the Taliban and its backers, as we've all seen in the last few weeks, with these terrible incidents of Afghans killing the very men that are training them. And what President Obama said in the third part of his speech that you showed here was that we want to create a security system, an army, a system that can take the place of us and that we can therefore leave Afghanistan. Right now, it's not clear that this army that we can't even guarantee is on our side 100%, can stand up to the Taliban, but most importantly, the Taliban's backers. The madrasa system, those who keep coming across the border, all these people are still very much there, and I don't think that you're going to see a clear end to that until such time as the United States and its allies have left Afghanistan. But can we leave Afghanistan if the other point that the president made is that al-Qaeda does not return to Afghanistan? And that I certainly can't guarantee sitting right here now.
Yeah, certainly. You say the U.S. doesn't want to leave until they know that they won't lose. I think we could talk for hours about what the definition of winning and losing in Afghanistan would mean. But sadly, we're out of time. Fascinating discussion there with author and journalist Jerry Van Dyke. Thanks so much.